Hi, Flosstube. It's Arlene here. It is Saturday, January 6th. Happy 2018. Um, I know it's been about 3 weeks since I last made a video. I kind of wish I could get myself back on a about every 2 week schedule, and we'll just see. But here I am. It is cold, and I think the last time I looked at my phone, it was like 10 degrees. It's been bitterly cold here. A snowstorm has been through. We've had some snow days from school, Thursday and Friday. We went back to school after winter break on Tuesday, which was just teachers and faculty and staff, professional development day on Tuesday. Kids came back on Wednesday. We had one school day, and then we proceeded to have 2 snow days. That's what my week has been. In all honesty, I've been doing a lot of working on designs and stitching, and just focused in my needlework side of life, and I'm not complaining. I just have really, really appreciated being able to immerse myself into pursuing needlework things. Like I said, working on designs mostly is just a gift when I have the time to do it. So I know there are some parents out there that are a little frustrated. I have a friend who's up in Massachusetts, and she posted on Facebook on Wednesday. She's bringing her daughter and son home. They're both in elementary school, and the school crossing guard says to her, "See you on Monday." And she posts it with something like hashtag, "What does he know?" Hashtag, "He's been here 30 years, had a bunch of those things." And sure enough, he was right. She's been with her kids since snow started up there. I don't want to turn this Flosstube into a weather report. So I'm going to get to the stitching part of things that I have to share with you today. A lot of different stuff. I'm going to start with stitching update from the 2 projects that I showed at my last video. One that I've been working on a lot. I've posted a few times on Instagram and maybe once on Stitch Mania, but just want to share with you. I had talked last time. I have a printout here because I've been using it at various times when it was just a pain to have a other picture in front of me. This is a quilt that is on special exhibit until like tomorrow, this weekend, at the American Folk Art Museum in New York City. And I saw this exhibit back in November and was just amazed by these very unique quilts. Many of them what is termed mosaic quilts, that they're made up of lots of tiny, tiny pieces. The whole exhibit is referred to as war quilts because all of these pieces come from soldiers' uniforms, and who made them, and why they were made, and were they made by soldiers as an activity while they were recovering from war wounds is questionable, but some of them were just amazing. And so I had shared with you how I'm working on recreating this, or something inspired by this, in cross stitch. And so here is where I am with this project. And I shared how, because I couldn't, let me hold it this way, because the majority of this design, if I hold it up close enough, the majority of it is diamond shape rather than squares. There are some squares, I'll talk about that in a minute, but because the majority is diamond shape, the way I started, the only way I could process thinking about this in a complete fashion was that I needed to do it, and learn the quilting term is on point, which is as a diamond. And then, I mean, it would be my vision is that it would then be, framed square-like. So, wait, let me hold it correctly and try and get it as close to the camera as I can. So I'm doing this on 36 count 1/2. Each of those little dots is a cross stitch. I know even to my eyes it looks, it's exactly the look I want, in that what you're seeing is each cross stitch represents a square, or in this case a diamond, on the original quilt. Now, in the planning that I've done, I have not yet figured out these open spaces there, which correspond to these blocks that are like quilt blocks. You know, they're 8-pointed stars, most of them. Well, let me talk about that in a moment. The other area that I hadn't yet figured out was, so this area between this area and this area, which were all diamonds, but this area where things get a little different, I knew I would need to figure out some specialty stitches that would work. And it took a few tries. Another plug for that seam ripper slash purple white eraser thing. Vanna was the one who originally, to me, talked about it, but plenty of people have shared. I didn't even bother bringing it up. But, I mean, you can't see the evidence. So this, what I ended up doing here, which are Smyrna crosses, where you have a giant X and then a giant cross on top of that. I had, at one point, this side and even this side filled with two other options. I tried like a satin stitch looking thing, and I tried what I think were Rhodes stitches. I just didn't like what was going on there. Anyway, but I mean, you can't even see the evidence of where it got pulled out. So this is what I think I'm going with the colors more or less matching up to what's here. Although it's looking awfully red, white, and blue as I'm looking at it now. These chunks right here, I came up with this idea, and I think I like it, and I can't, because of the Q-snap and the computer, get it close enough. Well, maybe if I do that. Can you see what I did there? I'm just like weaving thread. What do y'all think of that? It gives me the right look. Now, the only thing that's going on just as an overall, and I'm happy to, I like this idea of sort of sharing a designing time with you all, because this is not, most of it's cross stitch, most of it's straight cross stitch, but this area in here, whatever I come up with for these, and then just this little part in the center is going to be specialty stitches that many of you use for cross stitch, or for some pieces. And I just have to keep playing until I find something that works. Now, I know the overall design is very busy, but then again, the quilt is very busy. I might end up using these spaces very differently as they originally were, because you need a place for your eye to rest, I think is the word that would get used. So I'll see. So I'm taking you guys along with me on this design journey. I like it. It's good that, I mean, all of this area is worked out. It's just following what I've already planned. So at the moments where I'm not trying to figure out something and I just need a night to just stitch, you know, that's what this is good for. And when I'm having a night where I'm, you know, ready to play and try this and try that, I still have some areas that need to be worked out. So that's the update on my mosaic quilt. So this is a design that I'm really needing to stitch to work out. It's not just play around on the computer screen until it looks okay. But I'm enjoying it, and that's what I want to share with you. And then just very briefly, I had also shared, and this is so weird for me to have two projects going, although I just worked on this a little bit. My design, so welcome if you are new here. If you didn't know, I last May started sharing designs that I have, or patterns that I've designed through my Etsy store, Works by ABC. And I can show you all. The name of my store is Works by ABC, printed on this mug. Thank you, Olivia and Elena, for this wonderful gift. And if you by any chance need to get in touch with me, my email is worksbyabc@gmail.com. Now, when I shared this gift on my last Flosstube, and so many people commented on how sweet and wonderful it was, and a few people said, well, they would miss my little sign. Don't worry, the sign has gone nowhere. The sign is still here, will be used if needed. But feel free to check out my designs in my store. So one of them is 3 lacy squares. It's one that I have wanted to do a model for. I started it because I needed something during winter break to bring with me for a couple of traveling places that the Mosaic quilt, which needed a little more thought, at least we're at the stage I was at that point, I couldn't. So I started working on this. It will be, this is all rolled up here, so all 3 of these squares I'm going to put vertically, boom, boom, boom. So this one's at the top. It is that one there, the one that's sort of reddish maroon color. I'm doing this on a 32 count fabric. It's gray, 2/2 in a silken colors thread called Medieval Mulberry. And I just love how the variegated colors are showing up from it. I just, this is why this is the kind of thing that I just love variegated threads for. A design that works beautifully with one color, but when you can make variegated threads really sing. I haven't worked on this since the point that I had taken it with me somewhere, and like I said, the Mosaic quilt is really, I just feel the passion to work on that all the time, but this will be a good one to have when I need something that doesn't require that much thought. And I love it. Again, love the way the threads are playing out. Just need more time in the day to be doing everything that I'm doing. Okay, so those are the stitching updates for this Flosstube. Last weekend, I had to do more or less an errand, but it was about an hour and a half away errand. And just to break up the trip, I was trying to see what else I could do. And one thing was a used bookstore that I hadn't been to in a long time, and partially because of where it's located. And I luckily thought of it and thought, you know, that would be a good place to stop. And it was a great trip to the used bookstore. I'm not going to share everything that I picked up just because, there's a limit to how much you could be interested in here. But there are a few things that I thought were well worth sharing for this video. Not everything I got was needlework. I don't buy reading books. As I've shared before, I'm a big fan of the library people. Use your public libraries. Use them for all they're worth. But there are treasures to be found in used bookstores. Perfect example. I have shared with you in my designing work a love of old inspirational books. I have shown you this book, Racinet, French, so Racinet may be the way to pronounce it, and Owen Jones, Grammar of Ornament. These are old books. These are like the Dover publications from, I mean, this is originally 1987. Oh, this might be a later printing. This one, whatever. Anyway, both of these books I have had from the library. The Owen Jones, I have literally had from the library for about 1.5 years now, starting when I was doing research on geometric design and Islamic art. This one a little bit less so because I just hadn't discovered it still until I started to do pattern designs. My library allows you to keep books for 3 weeks and renew them 4 times, so you can keep them 12 weeks at a time. You then have to return them, physically bring them into the building. They must go back on the shelf. They say for 24 hours, whatever. But then I go back a day or 2 later and have taken them out again. No, unless of course somebody has needed them, which no one has. And I actually have the bigger version of Owen Jones, which is the full, like this version only has the plates, the pictures. Both of these books have inspiration. I've used them for inspiration for some of my designs. I've shared that in previous videos. It's so funny because both of them are at the end of a 12-week cycle, like Monday or Tuesday of this week. I'm going to need to bring them back to the library. And there these were, sitting on the used bookshelf. Used bookstore bookshelf. $3 or $4 each. That was meant to be, people. Yeah. Yeah, these are nothing. I could have gone on Amazon at any time, probably gotten them for like, you know, these literally could be books that you could get pretty cheaply. But I never bothered because I had them from the library. But to see them, this was worth getting. And this, I mean, it just made me smile to see them. This was the great kind of used bookstore. I posted a couple pictures on Instagram. The kind of used bookstore that, you know, no decor whatsoever. It's in this like building, like in a warehouse area. You have to know where you're going. Tall shelves. There's like step stools all over the place. Just like crammed full of stuff. I'm pretty sure the name was The Old Bookshop in Morristown, New Jersey. I'm not sure. I'll put it down below for anyone who might be local or relatively local and loves that kind of stuff. Highly recommend going there. Like I said, it's been a few years since I've been there. And I'm now into new things. So anyway, had to share these. Yes, and this one at one point belonged to somebody named Sandy Cawthor, but I don't care. It was just nice to know that I got those. Then, a book that I just saw and smiled. I don't know if you all, when you see a book that you recognize and you say, I know where that's from. So, but I have to show you a book that I own before I show you the one that I got. So a number of years ago, I remember, and this is like a long time ago, there was an exhibit at a museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Yes, Salem, Massachusetts, as in witches and that. And I've been there both for like the October touristy, Halloweeny, crazy, not the way it's the spirit of the witches. That's the wrong way to come out. I know there's a respectfulness around those who were persecuted and charged with being witches at Salem. Okay. The town of Salem, there is also a tourist world that happens in the month of October. I've been there during that time, like when I was in college. Maybe twice. I also think I was there like during the summertime when it's just like a nice, peaceful, I think it's right on the water. But then I was also there when there is a museum there called the Peabody Essex Museum. And I think it's farther, it's not from like the old part of town. I don't remember the geography. I went there specifically. It was a time that I was visiting friends in Boston, but I planned that visit specifically so that I could then drive up to Salem to go to this exhibit that was called Painted with Thread, The Art of American Embroidery. And this exhibit was only items in the collection of this museum. And this was early on in I was certainly stitching at that point, and I only had the beginnings of interest in a needlework exhibit. I remember it clearly. I remember really enjoying it. The fact that I bought this book is a big deal to me because I know that I was not someone, I didn't buy catalogs of museum exhibits at that time, but there was enough beauty in here. I now can appreciate so much more beauty when it comes to a needlework exhibit than perhaps I did at the time this was there. Anyway, there's no price. I wish I knew how much I paid. There's no price on here. It was probably wrapped. I wish I knew how much this was originally because I know I bought this at the museum. Look, I even have the brochure. Here's the brochure of the actual exhibit. I wish, because that would help me, you know, really judge for myself how special that trip up there was. I remember the friends that I was seeing in Boston afterwards, and they were like, "You went up there just for that exhibit?" Yeah. They didn't get it. Whatever. Anyway, I I mean, I didn't remember this at all until I saw it on the shelf. There were two books that were put out. There was this, which was the catalog of the exhibit, and there was this. And I got this at the used bookstore last weekend for $4. Stitching a Legacy, American Needlework Projects and Stories. So this book was put out with Piecework magazine in association with the Peabody Essex Museum. And they even got ANG, American Needlepoint Guild, is involved with it. And what they did is they took pieces from the museum, and then they created projects to go along. You know, so there's a casket. There's a casket, and then they made a small project. Some of them are more clearly inspired by, and some are more direct connections. And as I was, you know, flipping through this there in the bookstore, and I was, you know, the first thought was, were the projects in here in the exhibit? And hold on, I'm trying to, I looked it up and then I don't remember the page. Right now I do remember the page number. All right, well, here's an example of one that, you know, so here's a sampler, like a schoolgirl sampler that's in the Peabody Essex Museum's collection. And the project they created is, you know, they took a motif from the sampler and they created a project with it. So that one's a very direct kind of one. But as I was flipping through this in the bookstore, I saw, it's near the end, this. And I was, you know, it's been years, and I knew that that dress was in the exhibit. I knew it. The project they created for this one is a motif for a wool shawl to embroider. So they just took one of the motifs from this dress, and they're basically saying, you could do whatever you want with this motif. They're suggesting put it on the wool shawl. And so as I bought the book, but brought home, took this book off my shelf, some of the projects in here were pieces that were definitely in the exhibit, because they're in this book, but a few of them were not. Will I make anything in here? Probably not. But what I loved about this, and this is different than some of the other books that I've collected that have been projects inspired by items in such and such museum. I have one, actually, they're part of the pile of books that this computer is sitting on. Needlework patterns from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Needlework masterpieces from Winterthur. What makes this one a little bit different is that they specifically give you the item from the museum that the project was inspired by and the background of that item. And then, you know, this one they took a border and they, you know, putting it on pillowcases. And I loved that aspect. This is like the step above what some of these other books are. So, you know, this is a case where I saw this book on the shelf and I was like, I recognize this. I probably saw ads in Piecework magazine at the time for this book. And without thinking there'd be a single thing that I would stitch from it, I don't think there's any way I was going to pay $40 for it. I'm glad to have it now for $4. So, and then when I was taking this one off my shelf, I mean, obviously I knew it was there, but it's, you know, so a couple videos ago when I did my, I call it a stash parade, when I was just showing you things that I wanted to work on if I had all the time in the world that were sort of other kinds of needlework and stuff. This book was sitting next to or near a book that I hadn't showed at that time. I'm like, ooh. And I got looking through it and everything. And no, this is not like the thing I'm going to start tomorrow. But I just wanted to share with you this book called Wessex Stitchery. Now, I debated whether or not to show this because I had this funny feeling, and I was right when I checked it. It's an out-of-print book. It is hard to find copies. It's one of those, you go on Amazon and it's like somebody's charging $175 kind of thing. So I'm showing this, and then someone's going to say, oh, I'm really so interested. Why did you show it? Because I can't get a copy of it, or a reasonable copy. Do not spend $175 for this book. I got this. Look, I got this when I went to the Nordic Needle Retreat in 2013. I know this very specifically. One of the classes they were offering was in Wessex stitchery. I think there were so many other things that I wanted to take. I sort of knew that you didn't need a class for this. If you had the book, you could follow the stitching. And I kind of put it out of my head, whatever. When I was at the store, there were so many things. I was building up my pile of stuff. I was in the sale room, clearance room, and in the scratch and dent book area was this one. Okay, the corner, sure. Okay, do we see that? A little, and it actually, okay. Half off, more than half off. Regularly $44.99, sale $19.99 is what I'm reading from the back. You bet I got it. The front cover is just a bunch of little motifs. It is a counted thread technique, so you would use it on a linen or an even weave kind of thread. The Mrs. I keep talking about Mrs. Foster. Is that her name? Mrs. Foster. And she sort of laid down the rules for this type of stitching. And some of her rules are just like, don't plan it out, just stitch it, which I just think is so funny. But I'll just flip through a few pages. It's not black work. It's not, but some of the stitches are like black work. There's a lot of motifs. If you were to Google Wessex stitchery, you will see some blog posts of people who've done some stuff with these stitches. You will get a couple of articles from Nordic Needle's website, which one of them includes a free pattern. So you can learn a little bit about this from there. I think the colors are beautiful. You know, of course, you're not limited by anyone's rules of color. There are just some neat ideas here. And I'm not saying like this project that pattern itself doesn't appeal to me. But here's an interesting sampler looking thing, like a band sampler. A lot of the stitches in here lend themselves to band sampler looking things. So the book has some history, has some, anyway. Put this in my list of stash to stitch someday. Making a design, making a pattern, making something that follows this style of stitchery, which is not that complicated to follow. It's just some stitching that involves what you might refer to as specialty stitches that are partially crossed, partially not, sort of black work, straight stitches, but there you go. So it was on the shelf, decided I wanted to talk about it. Okay, now what am I moving? Oh, now I'm moving, okay. So I was trying to think of, what else did I want to share today? Maybe it was because of a snowstorm, but I was thinking about whitework things. Whitework, needlework of all kinds. I know before I have shared about Yvette Stanton and her books and the different types of whitework that she has inspired me to do. So, but I took out some other whitework things that I've done in the past that I haven't shared yet. I have at various times mentioned going on, well, it was actually 2 different trips to France. And it's all a big maybe someday to travel like that again. I first heard about this woman who did these tour groups through Mary Corbett's website. The first one of these was in 2012, and um, that tour, for me, the highlight was going to a international lace event that was going on in France, and that trip had so many needlework things involved. So it was a group of needlework enthusiasts, and I was really the only lace maker on the trip, but everyone really enjoyed all of the component pieces. We started out in Paris for a few days, and one of the things we got to do was take an embroidery lesson, spend a day embroidery lesson at the House of Malebranche. So this is a book, Letters and Monograms from the House of Malebranche. Madame Malebranche is in her late 80s now. She is as I understand it, like an embroidery legend in that world. This is the English translation of this book. There's also obviously or is this bilingual? Never mind, this is trilingual. Obviously French and English. The third language in here, my gut reaction is that's Italian. I think that's Italian. Okay, the tour leader of my group had this personal connection with her for many, many years. And that was how our group, I think about 12 of us, did the day. We got to see some amazing embroideries that they had as a part of their collection, in-house collection, and then we spent some time doing a lesson with her. So, okay, I bought this book over there so that I could say, and I have it signed by both Madame Malebranche and by Christine Rosenthal, who was her co-author, as well as the teacher of the course who'd worked with her for years. And I could say that this came from France. That said, this is a heavy book, people. There was significant, and this was not the only heavy book I bought when I was over there. And you could buy this in the States, or I'm pretty sure you can order it on Amazon. If you like monograms, that's what this book is about. And, you know, good, there's a perfect, can you see it? There we go. That kind of white work is what we're kind of talking about here. So before our trip, we were sent some pre-work, and I'd gotten together with my friend Mary. We had, by chance, two people who live a town away from each other had signed up to go on this trip, who have the same last name, mind you. And so we got to know each other before the trip, you know, so that we could, you know, buy plane tickets on the same plane. We got together to work on our pre-work. And so I had taken this out. Now, can I? All right. So we were sent this piece of this is beautiful linen. Oh my God, I should so take these needles out. All right, well, all right. You didn't see that, people. There's needles that have been sitting in here for 5 years. So we were sent this piece of linen. And our pre-work was it was part of a pulled thread. Now, I have done pulled thread, hardanger, cut work kind of stuff. Mary had not. And we had to just pull threads. Now, this is not like linen that you would find in, you know, 32 count for. It's higher than 40 count. You know, I meant to get out the magnifying glass and count before I started. And I totally forgot to do that. But I think the instructions were to pull 2 threads, leave 3 threads, pull 2 threads, leave 3 threads. When we were there that day is when we were doing, you could see here the pulled work, the diagonal work there. That was part of the lesson, was practicing that. And then the actual piece, which was just started there and I had finished later on, was this. How do I, oh, well, that shows it. I don't know how else to show it better. So this flower, and you know, we just did little parts of it there. It's a padded satin stitch. So you have some layering of thread underneath here so it stands out. Here in the center part is where we were doing that pulled thread work. I mean, I mean, the majority of this was done after it. And for me, it was about, I have to do this. I started it on the trip. It's part of the memories of the trip. It's part of the experience of the trip. It's not something that I feel the need to frame, or it's just it's in the box of memories of the trip. Now, when I took this out to get ready for this video, I, oh my God, is it wrinkled? And yet at the same time, the design was drawn on with one of those methods, like the prick and pounce method, whatever it was, that was supposed to just wash out. And oh my God, and a lot of it was covered, but even you could still see an awful lot of the outline. And I washed and washed and washed this thing. And you know what? When I took it out yesterday, when I was putting together things I would show for this video, you know what I thought to myself? I don't own any of Best Press that Vanna talks about. I need some Best Press people, because I know after the multiple washings, when I finally, felt like I had gotten rid of all that, I forget whether it was like black or gray or blue, whatever color it was. I tried every ironing technique, freeze it and wet it and everything I could read. And it's something, I mean, this is beautiful linen, but, with other than getting starch, I just don't own starch. I didn't want to buy starch just for this, especially because I wasn't like doing anything other than putting it away in my France trip stuff. So that was a piece of my first trip. There are other parts of that trip that I've mentioned before, and there's still other parts I haven't even shared with you about. But that little piece of whitework. And so whitework, when that term is so big and vague, you could use it anytime you're talking about completely stitching white on white. I'm using this right now to talk about one of the few times, because it's not my favorite type of stitching on a non-counted ground, although that said, I mean, all fabric is made up of weapon warp, you know what I mean, threads that go in both directions. And that's the only way to be able to pull out those threads as the center part is. But in general, all this other stuff is more of like the surface embroidery techniques. And I can say that I've done little bits, with this being one of them. Little times I've tried surface embroidery techniques. It's not what I really enjoy. I'm glad I've tried them. But this type of white work that I said I was inspired to think about because of the snow, it was just the right time to share with all of you. Now, the second trip to France, which was 2 years later, that trip started in Paris and then did a whole loop around in other places, not going there now. The second trip, which was 2 years later, organized by the same tour leader, didn't have as much needlework related things as I wished. I loved the people I was with. I enjoyed parts of it. There's no question. It just wasn't as enjoyable as the first one was. One of the few things, so the second trip was in the southern part of France, and we flew into Nice, and then after being there for a few days, we did traveling around in the Provence area. And so one of the few needlework focuses there is, and the use of the words is a little different, embroidery, quilting, whatever you might call it, boutique. And I know that's how it's pronounced, boutique. The art and technique of a provincial treasure. The cheap, frugal side of me says, I am reporting that, so we were at the Boutique Museum, the official Boutique cultural place. They literally only had like 2 copies left of the English version of this book. 2 of my tour mates snapped those up. I thought no chance. I went home, was able to get a used copy pretty cheaply off of Amazon or something. So I was able to get this book, and you know, it's a beautiful case of, a friend of mine taught me this a long time ago. You know, souvenir. The French meaning of that word is related to memory, to remember. I may not have that exact, but it's a case where I wanted this book because I wanted to remember that afternoon. Whether or not I did anything, for me, it was the best day of the trip, and it didn't come anywhere close to the basically any of the days of the first trip. But this was important to have this, and this book is mostly, I'm trying to do a little bit of a flipping here. There's some technique, there's a lot of pictures. So what boutique is, it looks more like a quilting technique than you would say an embroidery technique. And that's why the word embroidery on the front, a little misleading. Because you are, in effect, you take two pieces of fabric and you sew them together, and you make, there's a quilt. I mean, obviously it doesn't always have to be white. You make what looks like incredible quilted looking things. What is it used for? A lot of quilts. But, you know, in wealthy families, it was frequent to, here's a child's jacket, although it does say, obviously, wealthy families. There are pictures of christening outfits, and, you know, it's special, unique and special things. So before the trip, trying to understand what looked like the best day of the trip on the itinerary, and I'm almost positive I got this book before the trip. I had ordered this book, and look at the subtitle of this one, Quilting. And so I was able to read and understand, and also you can find some videos online, understand the technique of it. And it's a pretty simple technique. It is not much more than well, I'm going to show you in a second. And so I was glad to have this background knowledge. While at the La Maison du Boutique, House of Boutique, what I did purchase were two patterns. I'm showing you this because, you know, in the spirit of, again, it was like the whitework of the Paris experience at the House of Malebranche. I needed to make something. And this is my piece of boutique. I think if it hadn't been sitting folded up for a while, it would lay more flat. Now, what is this? It's just a little decorative square. I mean, I suppose I would lay it on a table, almost like how a doily would be just a decorative thing. Now, how is it made? I'm trying to see if you can get, you could see it's not a complicated design. But I had no memory of this, so I took this out. Like, wasn't this very smart of me? So it's just white fabric involved. And clearly, I was trying to figure out what kind of white fabric to use. So I did 3 samples for myself on 3 different types of white fabric. Now, if I had to guess, this is the most basic of white cotton fabric, like quilting fabric that you would buy at Joann's. That this is this is clearly cotton heavier fabric. And this is something that's got a blend, because it is not, like, it's not picking up the wrinkles. So it's clearly not all cotton, and it's much softer. And so I did this little motif, which I pulled from the book, on all 3 pieces, just to see which fabric was the easiest to work with before I did this thing. And so because I have these little pieces, I could show you. I mean, all it is, 2 pieces of fabric. You stitch together with just small running stitch, like with sewing thread, small running stitch. And then you actually pierce the fabric and you put in, and I know that I don't remember the details in the whole book, what the history is, but you use yarn, like white yarn. And that's what gives the puffiness. And you're like, well, where are the holes? I mean, this is the amazing thing. I think this is really one thing I was playing with the fabric is you just like maneuver the fabric and the holes kind of disappear. Like I look at it now and I'm not sure I could tell you which side had the, maybe this, I'm not sure I could tell you which side had the holes that I used to help run the yarn through. So, and also it's interesting when you get a piece that, I mean, so there's yarn, obviously there's more yarn in the puffier areas, and like this area is just straight lines. You also have a neat effect of how much it kind of shrinks up, like I've forgotten. You know, this is the size. I'm pretty sure I would, you know, had used the actual size. And then this is what it reduced to just by, you know, the yarn taking up that extra bit. So if you've never heard of Boutique, which I had not heard of before, you know, the itinerary of that trip had come out, there's a little bit of France for you. I sort of knew that, you know, I completed that project because it was important. It was part of wanting to do something as a memory of that trip, but there's no desire to do more than what I've done. But it is another form of white work. And there's white outside. Although, in all honesty, the snow that's out there, there's been so much wind that the snow has like blown all over the place that it's even hard to say how many inches of snow came down because, I mean, I'm sure somebody has a good measuring tool. I don't. Like, when I look at certain places, like, I didn't have to clean off my car. Like, that's amazing. That's how much wind there was. I didn't have to clean off my car. I'm not talking about the weather during Flosstube, people. All right. Next on my list. So, if you are new here, in addition to my variety of, you know, I meant to say this before, especially for those who are new, thank you for being here. I know that so many Flosstubers, people who make Flosstube, are very focused on cross-stitch and the cross-stitch world, and that's wonderful. And I know that I'm very much an anomaly in the Flosstube world, in that I show all kinds of needlework, and I just want to say thank you and how much I appreciate those who enjoy the things that I show. And in addition to needlework, I also am a lace maker. And so I always save my lace work stuff for the ending part of my videos so that if you're not interested in it, no problem. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, but I am going to switch over to talk about lace right now. And actually sort of a new little part of this. In my last video, I actually had done a lace demo. Bobbin lace demo, because I just realized it had been a while since I had done that, and got some wonderful comments from that, and had two different people in different ways ask me about Needlelace, and realized I could talk a little bit about that. So lace, as it was made for, you know, centuries ago, in very general terms, you could say, fell under two categories, bobbin lace and Needlelace. And I think I've got it historically correct that Needlelace evolved first. And the times that I have been able to see old, beautiful old lace, the real old stuff, my eye is drawn to the Needlelace. Now, we're talking the old, beautiful stuff. The modern Needlelace, like what I have been able to do, I can't say I find it as beautiful. And that's partially because of the thread used and the techniques used. Not the techniques. The thread used, well, it just the old antique lace, some of the styles of the, when I just look at, you know, some that has been laid out on a table, and if I'm just making a quick judgment call of, oh my gosh, love that one, 9 times out of 10, that one is a needle lace piece as opposed to a bobbin lace. And, you know, I've kind of tried to figure this out for myself. So needle lace, as you imagine, is made with a needle as opposed to bobbins. I have only really completed one needle lace piece. I was a number of years back, there was a small exhibit, I hope I have this right, Hungarian, pretty sure Hungary is the country I'm talking about. There was a Hungarian, like, cultural center that had a small exhibit of a collector's lace. And I mean, I saw this brief little thing somewhere. I'm like, that's a little weird, but I gotta go check it out. It was stunning. And it was Hollis lace, Halas. It's like, I have to learn more. And it was a needle lace, and it's done in the most finest thread. And seeing that exhibit, seeing those small pieces up close and personal, and it was a cultural treasure. It is a cultural treasure. Made me want to learn more about needle lace. I could pick up some books. I could read the instructions. I could try, but you know, like anything else, you don't start with thread finer than sewing thread. You start with something bigger and you try it out, but sometimes it isn't as intriguing when you're trying it with thicker thread. 2 years ago, 2015, at the IOLI, International Organization of Lace, Inc., IOLI summer convention, I was able to take a one-day needle lace class. And that was perfect for me because I thought, wait a second. Now I'm missing a piece of this. All right, sorry. I'm sticking with this. There's another thing to share, and I'll have to put that on my list to share at another time. But the one-day needle lace class was just a general needle lace class. There are specific types, like Hollis, like a few others I'll point out in a minute. This was a general needle lace class, and I loved it because I created this. Have I shown this on a Flosstube video before? I think I have. I'm losing it, people. I think I showed this like back in September when I was talking about butterflies migrating. I don't mean to be re-showing things. Well, maybe there's some of you that haven't seen it before. Let's go with that, shall we? This is made of needle lace. And I'll show you some books in a minute, but I really liked her techniques. Very straightforward, very general, I'll say. Not specific to not too detailed about a specific type of lace, although she does have classes with a specific type of lace, but for this design. And one book that I purchased is the teacher, Loretta Holtzberger. So these are some flowers that she has designed, and most of them you need to create like one petal at a time, and then you put them together. But it's a good way to get interested or get into needle lace. But I haven't. I love the idea. I love the idea that it's small, it's portable. I just haven't made it happen. And then I had, the second time I've been able to take a class was about a very specific type of needle lace. And this type of needle lace is Italian. It's called Amelia Ars. Amelia Ars. Yes, this book is in Italian. No, I don't know Italian. The diagrams of it are enough for usefulness. Now, this was like a year ago, fall. I admit I haven't finished this project. It's one of these things that I could do it. I have all the instructions. I can, but the advantage of having an unfinished project is that it lets me show you how needle lace is done. Because this butterfly was originally on something like this. You need something to work off of. You don't work in the air. But this is nothing fancier than a couple of like index cards. The pattern, I mean, this is sitting under some, the equivalent of clear plastic kind of stuff. And you could see this has all been done. All of this area will get filled in various ways. Sorry, that was not helpful. All of this area will get filled in various ways. There's clearly a motif that goes on around here. Eventually, when it's all done, these stitches, like that one right there, here, is what's holding it to this card. The white thread that you see is not in any way sewn to the card. The only thing that is sewn through the card are the basting stitches. And so those basting stitches, which are actually like in yellow thread or something, get cut off, and then the lace is freed from the card. You need the card just to work against. You use your fingers to just kind of maneuver it. But you work against a surface. Now there's also, like, historically there's small little pillows, like the equivalent of a small bobbin lace pillow. But you need something to work against, but then you cut it free. And there's something really neat about that. So now that I took this out to be able to talk briefly about Needlelace, of course now I want to work on it and get it done. And I will someday. Just to show you a couple other books that I have. This one is not a pattern book or anything more than beautiful eye candy. Point de Gauze is a particular type of Needlelace. This is a beautiful book. It is not a pattern book. Well, no, I take that back. I mean, you can see right there. When it comes to patterns, where those pages go, you could, if you knew what you were doing, take something like that and do something beautiful with it. You would need some good experience, but I think you could. But if you are someone who just loves to look at beautiful lace, this is a book of beautiful lace. This is like what I would aspire to be able to create. I mean, this is the thing, is that I would need to make a bunch of these with some basic stitches, with some relatively thick thread. And when I say relatively thick, we're talking like one strand of DMC relatively thick. And really get good at the stitches before I could even, I mean, look at this front cover. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. But this, I think this is just, I mean, this was a buy the book for the eye candy kind of beauty. Now I want to sit down and look at this whole book again. And then, because I was taking out my Needlelace books, I wanted to share with you this. If you, again, if I've intrigued you with Needlelace and you want to say, well, what's a good starting book? It's a good starting book, and it's also a good story. This, I'm looking for the date, Catherine Barley, first published in 1993. So this is a Needlelace book. It's technique. It is, I guess you would, I mean, I haven't even looked to see what you could find on YouTube these days in terms of videos and stuff like that. But if you want to learn how to do something, not that I've really done it, but this would be a good book to try and learn Needlelace from. That said, I'm not saying it from the perspective of someone who actually has. She goes through 4 different types of techniques. Grosse Point de Venise, which is an Italian Needlelace. Holly Point, which I think is a English. Point de Gauze, which is from Brussels. And I guess that's it. And I mean, I would focus on the Point de Gauze if I was me. But here's the cool story. This was a book published, again, about 20-something years ago, out of print. Another case, like we see in the cross-stitch world, of people charging ridiculous prices on the eBays and the secondary used book market, and some people paying those ridiculous prices. And Catherine Barley keeping her eye on that and saying, this is ridiculous. And a few years ago, and there was an issue, because I remember reading about it, something about who had the rights, the publisher still had the rights, she had to buy out the publisher, whatever it was. But she took it upon herself to say, enough is enough. Got the rights back, or whatever it was, and has since self-published it herself. So this, I mean, I had seen a copy of this book by borrowing it from IOLI's library, but now when I heard that she republished it herself, and she chose to do a spiral binding, you know, the original one, it was hardback or paperback, but she republished it. I think it looks identical. I think that's what she said. But her self-published version is from 2014, print on demand. She has a website, www.catherinebarley.com, and I order it from her. She's in England. It's not showing up. There we go, Catherine Barley. This would be a suggestion if you wanted to learn about needlelace because you wanted to try it yourself. All right, I am at an hour, people. I was going to do some more bobbin lace. Do you want to stick around for that? You know what? I'm all set to do it, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and you're either sticking around for it or not. Oh, lose my butterfly. I was also going to show you this because of something I was doing with my lace. I had taken out this book because of a reference, and I realized, oh yeah, this is also on my lace stash list. I want to make a clock. Probably not this particular design because this one is not super duper appealing to me, but I own a clock. Look, McKenna, it's not a clock I bought at a thrift store. It's like Sudbury House clock that's like made for needlework. But I got this at like a, you know, guild, what was it? You know, like a whole bunch of guilds together were having a sale, and some of the guilds were selling off stuff owned by members, one of those kinds of things. And I'm pretty sure I paid half of that price. So for what? $7? Less than $7. I got a Sudbury House clock. And the plan for this is someday to make a lace thing to go in the center, something like this. Although ideally I would find a 12-pointed design. But I'm just mentioning that because this book was out because of something I was trying to look up on how to do something. Okay. I'm going to try to maneuver the computer around. I'm going to try and do it without, where'd my lace pillow? Without, I've got so much stuff on the floor now, people. And I've just dropped my pin cushion. Luckily, it's magnetic, so I can pick up all the pins that are on the floor right now. Okay. What I realized after my last demo, a couple of comments, but you almost didn't even need to comment, I realized it myself, is that there were a lot of things you couldn't see. And I wished that I had been shooting from this side instead of the side that I was at. Okay, now let me try and get, so I'm going to be, oh, but I need to be able to work. I'm going to be working like right here. Now, of course, when I have not worked that much on this, which I'm sad to say, even though it's been winter break, I should have worked more. I was working the other day. I worked on this side. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do a little part on film, a little part of this. And then I totally realized I should have done this side instead and then had this side free to show you guys because that would have been closer to the camera. It's all right. I will do my best. Now, I got to get the pins that just fell. Give me a second here. Great. There are pins all over the floor, people. All right. So a couple things that did not become clear from my last demo. Everything that you see here are pins that are in the pattern. It is good to leave a good 3/4 of an inch of pins in. I mean, I could probably start pulling some of them out. I'm not going to yet. Just to let the threads kind of settle in. I'll be doing like 4 repeats of this pattern up to about here. And certainly at a certain point, I mean, I got plenty of pins, but I'll just start pulling them out just because I want to start reusing them. I like my pin setup. Different people have different pin cushions, pin setups, pin bowls, whatever. I have this little magnetic thing. So it works really well for me. This is a hedgehog. And I may have said this before, I don't remember. Lace makers, there's some lace makers that get way into the hedgehog thing. Lace makers use hedgehogs as a mascot, I'll say. And you will see some lace makers who have little hedgehog everythings. And some lace makers who have like all kinds of hedgehog stuff decorating their pillows. And some people go a little nutsy about it. Literally the only hedgehog thing I have is that magnetic pincushion, magnetic pincushion you would say. And I love it. And frankly, if it had not been a hedgehog, excuse me, whoa, it would have been, all right, that is a really bad, sorry. So I'm trying to work here at, this is such an odd angle that I'm doing this, but I'm trying to see how you could best see. And there's an element of when you are doing bobbin lace like this on camera that I just don't know how else to show you seeing it in any best way. So where I'm working on in the pattern right now is a place where I am, unlike the last time, closing my pin. So for every pin I'm putting in, I'm doing a cross, twist, twist, putting a pin in, and then cross, twist, twist after the pin. I know that, because I just watched it before to remind myself, that what I was doing before was an area where I was not what's called closing the pin. And that just produces a different effect, or, I mean, literally, it's a different stitch. I use that word differently than we think of in, like, needlework world, but it is, in lace world, a different stitch. So cross, twist, twist, pin, cross, twist, twist is a different stitch than what I was doing before, which was cross, twist, twist, twist. It was 3 twists. Now, what I'm doing in this next little area, or this little area, which there's no way you're able to see the details of, but at some point when this piece is finished and I can have it off the pillow and I could point it out to you, this little area is going to include a stitch, or rather what you call a filling, called a honeycomb. And honeycomb gives a little bit of an open area. And I really like the effect that honeycomb has. What's happening over here on the edges, what I just did 5 twists on, are called picots. In general, I fully admit, I do lousy picots. One side is usually better than the other. I mean, I say this, but truthfully, you really can't tell until you take the pins out. It's one of those skills that I say, I need to practice, I need to make it better. And, you know, sometimes there are things you want to make better, and there's sometimes you're like, am I fudging it good enough? When I started this pattern, I was trying to, I had to remind myself about how do I make picots, which way do things go. I'm now getting ready to go back this way. Nope. I got things twisted here. Go. Here we go, making another picot here after I tension the thread. 2, 3, 4, 5. I put in 5 twists. I go under and over. See, yes, under and over, and swing around with the pin. Put the pin in. Do a little wiggle. Put the thread around the pin. Did I get it? Yep. Put in 2 more twists. Sometimes I can tell when the tension is worked and sometimes I can't, and most of the time it's like, well, we'll see what it looks like when it comes off. And now I'm back to, no, see, this is why I can't talk while I'm doing this. These guys are going here. There we go. Oh, it needs a twist. Now, cross, twist, twist. Pin. Cross, twist, twist. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to share about lace for today. I just thought enough people very kindly shared such nice things about seeing the lace demo last time. I know there were comments, I could watch you make lace for hours. No, you couldn't. It's not that exciting, people. But I thought I could at least do a few more minutes. Oops. What do I do over here? Oop. So, gotta bring this one down. Cross, twist, twist. Just when I was working on this yesterday, or no, it was 2 days ago, and I thought, I know I'm going to make a floss tube this weekend. Can I get it set up in a place that I could do at least a few minutes without too much thought? Yes, I can. I'll do a few minutes of sharing. I have purposely not talked too much about the Flosstube retreat coming up in May. I am very excited about it. I know that there's a lot of little things that I've been working on. The other day I was thinking about whether or not I would bring a lace pillow to work on, just to show what lace is. And I don't know if I will. I mean, there's a side of me that's like, should I do that? Or will I be like the weird kid in the corner where people roll their eyes and say, what's she doing over there? But it does become something that folks are interested in when they see it. Oh, just because we're at a different angle right now, I'll show you that this thing right here, which I keep up because this is just clamped on here. This is my bobbin winder. It helps me wind bobbins. All right, I am now at 1 hour and 12 minutes, and that's longer than you probably wanted to spend with me today. Thank you so much for hanging with me. I love being a part of this community. I so appreciate the comments. I so appreciate your caring. I love being able to share with all of you. I hope if you are in a cold part of the country, you are staying warm in whatever you are doing. If you are in another part of the country or another part of the world, that you are doing fine wherever you are. Thank you so much for being with me, for subscribing and commenting and everything. And I really appreciate all of you. Till next time.